Breaking tonight, the federal Liberals secure a majority government. The by-election win giving Mark Carney's government more power, the unusual path and the pushback to this majority.
I think Canadians are disturbed by this.
And what it all means for you. At Issue is standing by. The U.S. blockades Iranian ports and threatens to eliminate Iranian ships that come near it.
They're really blackmailing the world. We're not going to let that happen.
The showdown with massive impacts for energy markets and why it might get even worse. And picking a fight with the Pope.
There's nothing to apologize for. He's wrong.
The backlash after Donald Trump posted an image depicting himself as a Jesus-like figure.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us as we track breaking news. Mark Carney has secured a majority government. CBC News projecting the Liberals picking up 2 Toronto seats in by-elections tonight. This is Canada's first majority government since 2019, and it comes just about a year after the general election. But the path to this moment is controversial. The Liberals making these big wins only after a string of floor crossings from opposition parties. So a big night for the Liberals, but this majority is still very thin. And while the Prime Minister congratulates his new MPs, the Conservative leader is accusing him tonight of a cynical power grab. Ashley Burke begins our coverage.
It is official! It is official!
The Prime Minister's taken a minority government and through by-elections and floor crossers, almost a year later, cobbled together a majority.
As of tonight, Mark Carney and our entire incredible Liberal team have earned an even more powerful mandate to continue building a better Canada.
The Liberals winning seats in Toronto's University Rosedale and Scarborough Southwest, both long considered safe seats for the party.
Tonight, we celebrate a new beginning.
It was a tight night in the Montreal area riding of Terrebonne between the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois. The Liberals hitting this majority with the help of 5 opposition MPs who defected to join Mark Carney's team.
Bonsoir, chers libéraux.
4 from the Conservatives and 1 from the NDP. The New Democrats leader says it's not right.
Canadians did not elect a majority government, and if they end up with one, largely through floor crossings, it just feels wrong.
The Conservatives continue to describe it as an undemocratic power grab.
The government seems committed to their strategy of backroom deals to achieve a majority.
The Liberals pushing back and weighing in on what a majority would mean.
I think what a majority does is it actually gives you time to effectively plan. That's what this country needs right now, given what's going on globally.
The Prime Minister tonight online congratulating his 2 new MPs for winning their seats.
And Ashley, the leader of the official opposition, also now commenting online.
Adrian, the Conservative leader, is accusing the Prime Minister of getting this majority through backroom deals with politicians that he says betrayed voters. Despite losing 4 members of his caucus to the Liberals, Pierre Poilievre also says that he'll continue to lead his party, including in the next election.
All right, that is Ashley Burke in Ottawa. So let's bring in Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barton now. So Rosie, can you lay out for us tonight what these results mean politically for the Liberals?
It is an extraordinary moment for the Liberal Party, for this Prime Minister who less than a year ago won his first election and a minority. It is an extraordinary moment for the Liberals who more than a year ago were all but dead politically with a different leader. So think back about how things changed so quickly and so dramatically. And it is an extraordinary moment because of the way this has come together, as Ashley pointed out here. 5 floor crossers, both from the Conservatives and the NDP, and now these by-election wins. This has never been seen before. It really is unprecedented. And yes, it is drawing the ire, obviously, and frustration of the opposition parties, particularly the Conservatives. But floor crossing is allowed, and these MPs, when they go to be elected the next time, will have to prove to voters that it was worth the risk.
So what about how the Liberals govern? How is this likely to change that?
It changes some things quite substantially. One of them that we probably don't talk enough about is how parliamentary committees work. It will give the Liberals the ability to have a majority on those committees, which means that the legislative work can happen at a much faster speed. It also means that the opposition parties, Adrian, don't have all the tools at their disposal to call ministers in front of committees, to try to embarrass the government and hold them to account. Basically, it means that the government's agenda can happen at a much faster pace. And because of the size of some of the commitments that the Carney government has made, they really do need some time in order to show Canadians that they can deliver. However, already tomorrow, we are expecting the Prime Minister to make an announcement about affordability, something that the Liberals say will help Canadians in the immediate.
And in terms of the Conservatives, I mean, is it very clear what tonight's results mean for Pierre Poilievre, or is it a bit mixed?
Yeah, it is not clear at all. Obviously, losing 4 MPs from your own caucus and now handing a majority to the Liberals is not a good news day for the Conservatives, and it is, a source of ongoing frustration for people inside caucus. Whether or not Pierre Poilievre can survive this, I think, is still very much in question. The thing that it also does for Pierre Poilievre is puts off, in the immediate anyway, any prospect of another federal election for 3.5 years or so. That could give him some time to adjust again, rebuild the party, convince those in his own ranks, his own caucus, that he has the ability to take on Mark Carney and deal with the current crisis in the world. The problem is that time might be on his side, but time may also lead some people around him in his caucus to question whether he can be leader in another election. So yes, very much still at question, I think, how this affects Pierre Poilievre, but there was a message here for him tonight as well.
All right, thanks, Rosie. You'll be back soon with more analysis from the At Issue team. We'll see you then. Quebec's new premier is expected to be sworn in on Wednesday. In Christine Fréchette's first press conference since her victory, she said she will distinguish herself from her predecessor, François Legault.
I think I have my own style, my own personality. I'm from another generation, Generation X. I'm a woman. This comes with a certain number of change.
She also teased several announcements in the coming weeks, including plans to help with affordability. Fréchette secured about 58% of the vote in the Coalition Avenir Québec leadership race, tasked with reviving that party's popularity only months before the next election. Well, the American blockade of Iranian ports is in effect tonight, an attempt to prevent Tehran from exporting oil and pressure the regime to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And as Katie Simpson shows us, this comes as both sides just escalate their threats.
Anger in Tehran, backlash over the American blockade, a pro-government rally drawing thousands into the night. The U.S. says it's now stopping ships headed to or leaving from Iranian ports, an attempt to choke off valuable oil revenue. On state TV, the American blockade is called illegal and an act of piracy. And in a new post from the Revolutionary Guard, Iran threatened to introduce methods of warfare it says the enemy cannot even imagine and will have little ability to counter. The way the message is delivered in contrast with what came out of the White House at a food delivery event meant to promote the president's domestic agenda and his no tax on tips policy. Here, Trump declared his Iran strategy is working.
We've been called this morning by the right people, the appropriate people, and they want to work a deal. They would like to work a deal.
After the U.S. and Israel launched the war on Iran back in February, Iran effectively imposed a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, which was supposed to be lifted as part of the ceasefire agreement, but Iran did not follow through. Peace talks hosted this weekend by Pakistan failed to lead to a meaningful breakthrough. Iran called U.S. negotiators untrustworthy. The U.S. says Iran is refusing to give up its nuclear ambitions.
Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. And we agreed to a lot of things, but they didn't agree to that. And I think they will agree to it. I'm almost sure of it. In fact, I am sure of it.
The war and disruption have upended energy markets, causing a surge in fuel prices around the world. The UK announcing it will co-host a summit with France to try to find ways to help reopen the strait.
And let me be very clear. This is about safeguarding shipping and supporting freedom of navigation once the conflict ends.
With the ceasefire deadline just over a week away, the U.S. president declined to say what he'll do if there isn't a deal.
Yeah, I don't want to comment on that, but it won't be pleasant for them, let me put it that way.
Vice President J.D. Vance is leading talks for the Americans, and he says if there are going to be more negotiations, it's up to Iran. And he says they need to show flexibility if there's going to be a deal.
And Katie, this new blockade from the Americans also comes with more threats from the president.
Yeah, Donald Trump says if Iran sends what's left of its Navy, these fast attack ships close to the American blockade, the president says they'll be eliminated, the same way the U.S. has blown up suspected drug boats in the Caribbean.
All right, that is Katie Simpson in Washington. When the U.S. blockade was announced last night, markets were rattled. Take a look at Brent crude. That's an international benchmark. Over the past few days, it hovered below $100 U.S. a barrel until news the blockade was happening, and then the price jumped about 8% in minutes. But throughout the day, calm set in, the price drifting back below the $100 mark, and markets actually closed up for the day. In theory, the restricted movement in the Strait is even more severe now, and from markets, it's basically a shrug. Senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong is here with us now. What is happening?
Well, I think markets are really trying to get a sense of what all of this means and what the path out of it is. But there's this growing understanding that what we're seeing on markets and the prices we're seeing in global energy markets simply don't reflect the true seriousness of the crisis we're in. And just by way of comparison, think back to COVID, right? We shut down the global economy. And in that time, global oil production shut down by like 8 million barrels a day. We're currently losing 13 million barrels of oil every day, and people are acting as though nothing's changed. Maybe a little bit higher prices at the pumps, but that's it.
So when then do they start to feel that?
Well, it will hit in different areas at different times, and it's already being felt in some areas. Sri Lanka has told people to work from home a couple of days a week. In South Korea, they've told public servants that they're only allowed to drive on certain days to get into work. Richer countries have reserves, so they have more cushion. They'll face some restrictions, but they'll have more options. Poorer countries are more exposed. Bangladesh uses Qatari LNG to power its electrical grid, literally to keep the lights on. Here in North America, the last of those shipments from the Persian Gulf will probably arrive this week, but only this week. We're more insulated, so we won't probably see that kind of shortage that we'll see in South Asia, but we will see higher prices for everything, not just for gasoline.
But none of this explains why oil is still, right. You know, what is happening, like why oil is down and the markets are up from last night.
So I spoke to one analyst who said markets and oil traders, they understand this is a catastrophe, but they also think it's such a catastrophe that there must be a way out. Problem is, he told me that 3 weeks ago, and it's been getting worse by the day since then, and there's still no clear way out.
One day you will come with good news,
I'll
not
try.
today. Peter Armstrong, thank you.
You bet.
The family of an Ontario man killed in southern Lebanon says he died while trying to help someone who'd been injured during a drone attack.
Me and him, we were split souls. We never separated, you know? So my memories is all around him. Like, he was the closest to me in my family.
38-year-old Mohammed Hassan Haider was a married father of 5 and had dreams of having the largest horse farm in Lebanon, according to his siblings. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister says she is aware of a Canadian killed in Lebanon, and she extends her condolences to the family. Well, the war in Iran is sparking a war of words between the U.S. president and the Pope. Aaron Collins has the back and forth and the bizarre AI image depicting Trump as a Jesus figure overshadowing all of it.
Outside the White House, Donald Trump doubling down on his criticism of the Pope.
There's nothing to apologize for. He's wrong.
Pope Leo has been critical of the war with Iran, speaking out last week after Trump threatened to destroy the Iranian civilization. Now, the war of words with the pontiff escalating.
He didn't like what we're doing with respect to Iran, but Iran is wants to be a nuclear nation so they can exterminate the world. Not going to happen.
On board a flight to Algeria, the Pope seemingly uninterested in sparring with the president.
I do not look at my role as being political, politician. don't want to get into a debate with him.
Still, the head of the Catholic Church clear he will continue to speak his mind.
Too many people are suffering in the world today. Too many innocent people are being killed. And I think someone has to stand up and say, there's a better way to do this.
Outside the largest Catholic cathedral in the U.S., the back and forth between the first American Pope and the U.S. President, troubling for some.
I stand with the Pope. I mean, the Pope speaks the gospel. He speaks for peace.
It's terrible. It's gross. It's blasphemous. It's his usual.
Now, Trump may have further strained his relationship with Christians with a social media post last night. In the AI-generated image, the president is depicted as a Jesus-like figure with light emanating from his hands as he appears to heal someone. But Trump denied that the image was religious.
How did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor.
Still, backlash to the post was swift.
Whether it's Republican or Democrat, this isn't a matter of politics. This is a matter of religious principles. This is a matter of valuing what is most sacred.
Well, that post has now been taken down, but between the post and feuding with the Pope, the political damage to the president with American Christians may already have been done. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
A U.S. federal judge has dismissed a case brought by Donald Trump against a Wall Street Journal that was seeking $10 billion in damages. The suit focused on a story published by the Journal last summer about a birthday card Trump allegedly sent to Jeffrey Epstein in 2003 before the financier was charged with sex trafficking. It described an illustration of a naked woman and a cryptic imaginary conversation between the two men. Trump then accused the paper of maliciously making the story up before the card was released by Epstein's estate. Hungary's election winner is vowing closer ties with Europe a day after a landslide victory. Peter Magyar says Hungary will be a constructive partner. His center-right, pro-EU party took 2/3 of seats in parliamentary elections. The victory ends far-right nationalist Viktor Orban's 16-year grip on power. Orban was a key ally of both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump and clashed with European leaders pushing to end the war in Ukraine. Well, coming up, with tonight's by-elections, CBC News projects Mark Carney's Liberals secure a majority government. And Rosie will be here with a special edition of At Issue next.
At issue, the Liberal majority. With the by-election wins tonight, the Liberals have seized control of the House of Commons with Canada's first majority government since 2019. So what will this power dynamic, this shift, mean for Parliament Hill? What could this kind of stability mean for the Liberals? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it all down for a special by-election At Issue. Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj, and in for Chantal tonight is Catherine Cullen. Nice of you all to be here to react right away to what is a significant development for the Liberals in an unprecedented way, Andrew. They now have a majority. They have a little bit of wiggle room. What do you think this changes in terms of the expectations for the government?
Well, it doesn't change the stability a huge amount. I mean, whether you're 1 or 2 seats in minority or 1 or 2 seats in majority, what's really stabilizing this government is the Prime Minister's popularity, the popularity of the government. Nobody's going to bring this government down anytime soon. What it does do is it allows them to push through their agenda a lot quicker, control of the committees. They'll be able to invoke closure or time allocation if they wanted to cut off debate. So from that standpoint, it makes life easier for them. Whether that's good from the standpoint of accountability is not so clear. But should their popularity turn against them, it does give them an insurance in the long run. At some point, the government will fall into, as governments always do, fall into some odium with the public. So that's an opportunity for the Prime Minister, if he wants to take it, that he's in the position to be able to spend down some of that political capital if he needs to do difficult but necessary things for the country, and we'll see whether he takes that opportunity.
It does, Althea, certainly allow a certain ease to get things through. And the Prime Minister talked about it on the weekend, but I think it's the speed at which he might be able to get some things done. And he probably needs that speed because he needs to start showing Canadians that he's getting some results.
Well, it gives him breathing room. Sorry, I'm a little sick. I think I'm going to cough.
Yeah.
Pardon me. You know, they have had a pretty easy way so far. They've been given carte blanche in many ways by the Conservative Party, but now he gets to decide what trade-offs he would like to do, the Prime Minister would like to do with different parts of the Liberal coalition. And over the weekend, we got a good speech from the Prime Minister in which he clearly laid out that he understands the different parts of the Liberal coalition. And there are a number of challenges in the next few weeks and months, whether that's the CUSMA renegotiation, whether that's the midterms, whether that's making good on all of the promises that he has laid out. In many cases, the Carney Liberal agenda is a generational agenda. It's a decades-long, at minimum, agenda where you actually know whether or not the government has made the right bets. And he gets to start defining himself as he would like without the pressures of external events. So it's great for the Liberals. It's really great for the Conservatives. I'm sure we'll talk about that. And it's good for the NDP. Politically, it's great. Whether it's great for the voters, I think it's too early to tell.
All right, so no one's necessarily unhappy. We'll talk about the Conservatives in the next block. I'm not convinced they're dancing on the ceiling here, Catherine. But what does this mean for the Prime Minister, who really not only brought this party back from the dead, but now has brought them back to a place where they haven't been since 2019?
Well, I think, Rosemary, when you look at the amount of effort that went into getting them to this place, yes, we're announcing this tonight because of these by-election results, but the floor crossers were integral to all of this. The Liberals have talked about this as being something of an organic process. You know, one MP starts talking to somebody in a neighboring riding and things just go from there. But we know that there is a campaign, in a manner of speaking, when we look at the fact that 5 have already crossed, and there are a lot of questions about who else might come over now that they have crossed this majority threshold. It speaks to the fact that the Liberals want this. They feel that they need this, yes, certainly for the security and the stability, but also to get their agenda through. So I think this leaves us with some big questions about what exactly it is that they feel they haven't been able to do quickly enough, that they still want to get passed in Parliament, because some of Mark Carney's biggest challenges are outside of Parliament, right? It is things like Donald Trump getting big things built, increasing what Canada sells to the world. And Parliament doesn't have a lot to do with some of those really sort of big hallmark challenges he's facing.
Andrew, the fact is, as Catherine points out, that this majority was secured, let's be honest, primarily through the 5 floor crossers, and these 2 by-elections are sort of what clinched them, pushed them over the edge. Is there any question there, not around the actual legitimacy of the majority, but how that looks to Canadians, and whether there is any discomfort with the way this majority has come about, or is the Prime Minister simply too popular and so it doesn't really matter to voters?
I think it ought to be disquieting to people because we don't really know what their motives were. If it was just because they were afraid of losing their seats, that's venal, but it's understandable. But were they offered something? Were they offered jobs? We don't know. We had the other possible motive put forward by Magyar Gladu, who said, well, she'd noticed that government ridings tended to get more government spending than opposition ridings. Well, if that's the argument, then why should anybody be in the opposition? And we feed this, I think, we in the media, when we talk about, oh, these poor opposition members, they don't want to sit in opposition for 3 long years. Opposition members actually do useful work. They're holding the government to account, they're exposing government wrongdoing, they're making ministers answer for their portfolios. Government side MPs, their basic job, whichever party's in power, is just to wave things through. It's to be a voting machine. So let's not devalue the role and importance of opposition MPs in our system of government. And this sort of thing, beyond, of course, betraying the trust of the people who voted for these MPs to represent a particular party, it just calls into the whole system. It makes it to some degree of disrepute.
Do you think that that's an issue, Althea, that the Prime Minister will have to manage at some point, particularly if there are more people who cross the floor?
I don't think the floor crossers are the issue for the Prime Minister to manage. I believe the floor crossers are an issue, frankly, for the floor crossers themselves to manage. Back home, sure. I think it does feed into general cynicism towards politicians. I do think there will be questions about, what did you get in return for these votes? I do think that government backbench MPs or backbench MPs of the governing party have an important role to play, too. I think part of the problem in Ottawa, and we're part of the problem too in the media, is that we kind of reinforce that the backbench MPs are there to rubber stamp what the government is doing. But I think what we're going to see in the next months, especially if more floor crossers come and the Liberal majority becomes larger, you will have parts of the Liberal backbench who start to flex their muscles a little bit more and say, well, wait a second, we're not comfortable with that. And we saw a little bit of that in terms of about a dozen or so Liberals who supported an NDP's private members bill. That's, minor, small potatoes, but they will also be looking to be doing work that is satisfying for them, whether that's quizzing ministers perhaps in a more aggressive way when they come to committee. Maybe that's suggesting that things, I don't want to say make work projects, but they're given studies to sink their teeth into and things like that when the Liberals have a majority on those committees. What it means, though, in terms of politics and the politicking for the floor crossers, I think is different questions in different ridings, because I think some people have more support for their choices than others have had.
What does this mean for the Prime Minister ultimately, Catherine, in terms of how he manages this caucus that he has cobbled together from various different places, and the fact that he now has the majority that they thought they almost had last year?
I mean, I think it is going to test his caucus management skills, Rosemary. On the one hand, the polls say he's very popular right now, and I think that is going to convince a lot of MPs, certainly for some time, to go along with his agenda. He did bring the Liberal Party back from essentially the political dead, but at the same time, you just have to look at what happened with Stephen Guilbeault leaving cabinet over the Alberta MOU, the agreement, to see that there are moments where the rubber does hit the road for MPs, and they say, even if what the Prime Minister is doing might be favored by a significant number of Canadians, they're willing to speak up. And so the size of this majority becomes a very significant question, and Mark Carney's ability to keep all these people with, it's been said very much, but quite a diverse range of views, right? From Laurie Idlout to Marilyn Gladu, keep them all rowing in the same direction. It is going to be a challenge, although, again, I don't think that it's necessarily blotted out by bigger challenges like trying to get along with Donald Trump and see some progress on those issues.
But when you have a majority and you're winning in the polls, that can calm a lot of nervous Nellies down in caucus, or people who have particular requests from the Prime Minister. We're going to look at the other side of this. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we will talk about how this new power dynamic on Parliament Hill, what it means for the Conservatives, the Bloc, maybe the new NDP, but what it means for Pierre Poilievre. That's all next. With the majority secured, the Liberals now hold the power on Parliament Hill, stability in the House of Commons, not seen since 2019. But what does it mean for the opposition? What challenges come with this new dynamic? Here to break it all down again for a special by-election at issue, Andrew, Althea, and Catherine Cullen. I will say that Pierre Poilievre has responded on social media saying that the Liberals did not win a majority government through a general election or today's by-elections. It was done through backroom deals, and he goes on to say he will continue to lead his fight for all the things that matter to Canadians inside the House of Commons. But this is not a good night for Pierre Poilievre tonight, Althea. Obviously he wanted to try and hold Mark Carney to a minority, and he now sees himself without the prospect of an election, but with a Liberal majority.
I'm not sure I agree with that premise. I think the Conservatives are quite happy to have 3 years of breathing room ahead of them. I think Pierre Poilievre is relieved. A lot of the Conservative benches were very worried, especially those MPs in Ontario, about a possible snap election this spring. They all thought, not all, many of them thought they were going to lose their seats. And you had some people who weren't really thinking about floor crossing start to think about it more seriously. And so I think that this is actually not a bad night for Pierre Poilievre. He gets to take a step back. He doesn't have to be in the House of Commons as often. He needs space to distinguish himself from the governing party. So it means he can be more critical. He can vote against things now in a way that he couldn't without repercussions in the fall. And so it's actually kind of a renewed lifeline. Now, what the people in his party and his caucus who want to see him gone do with that is a different question. But the roadway ahead of them is far longer and gives him way more time to try to convince people. It's like a pressure valve release.
So, I mean, it gives him time, and everyone agrees that that might be helpful for Pierre Poilievre. But Catherine, he's still the Conservative leader who lost an election he was going to win and has now, because of his own caucus members, handed the Prime Minister a majority. And I would imagine that, I just don't know how that sustains for another 3 years until an election.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big question hanging over him. Relieved, Rosie, happy, I'm less convinced. I think, there's that expression, out of the frying pan into the fire. I think this is the reverse. He got out of the fire today, which was the possibility of a general election, but he is sitting in that frying pan. Cooking now, essentially, right? Waiting to see whether caucus will tolerate this idea that they now have to remain in opposition for the next 3 years. Yes, I think Althea is absolutely right when she says that there are many Conservative MPs who are happy that they didn't lose their job, but that does not mean that they are happy to see the numbers that they see right now, that they're happy with what happened in the last election. No one has stepped forward to be a true challenger to Pierre Poilievre, and Conservative MPs that I talk to, even those who are unhappy with him, are certainly still willing to give him some time. But I think there's an open question to what he does with that time. He has tried to do some of the things some Conservatives have wanted. Speak to the mainstream media, these international travels. He's tried to make efforts, and the message tonight is, well, Mark Carney has a majority government and you continue to trail in the polls. So I'm interested to see whether he retreats to some of those instincts to be the Pierre Poilievre of the last election campaign, or finds some kind of new ground to move himself forward in a challenging situation.
What do you think is likely to happen here, Andrew, in terms of what we might see from Mr. Poilievre and how this might unfold?
Well, a lot's going to depend on what happens next. So I agree that this is a breathing spell. It's a relief, as Althea said, providing that the exodus of MPs stops here. And we've no reason to believe that it necessarily will. So that's going to be his challenge. Otherwise, it's just death by 1,000 cuts, and it prevents either him or the party from being able to get any momentum up. So he's got to stop the bleeding in that respect. Part of that is going to be over time. He's got to show that he can turn around their fortunes. But even before that, I think if you're providing inspiring enough leadership, if you're taking positions and stands that people really believe in, you're giving people some reason to want to stick around for idealistic reasons. If you also give people more agency and more role and more responsibility, which has not been the practice of Pierre Poilievre until now, well, then they've got a choice. You can cross to the Liberals and be under the iron grip of the party leadership. And let's not kid ourselves. The Prime Minister has all the tools he needs to enforce party discipline. But you can say to people, look, you can go over there and be just another pylon, or you can be a part of a real team here where you'll have real responsibilities, you'll have more freedom, more autonomy. That's hard for any party leader to accept. We've grown used to the idea that everything should be run right out of the leader's office. But he's in a bad way here. He needs to stop the bleeding, and that may be one of the things he can offer them.
Only a couple minutes left, Althea, but tell me how you think this move changes things for the opposition parties in terms of how they position themselves in the House now.
Well, first of all, it's great news for Avi Lewis and the NDP because he doesn't have a seat in the House and they get a lot of time to prepare and carve out their own agenda and what they want to bring their offer to voters next time. But I also think, to Catherine's point about the Conservative caucus, yes, there is nobody actively engaging, kind of telling people, hello, I'm sitting behind the curtains here. But it gives those people a chance actually to start organizing. It gives caucus a chance to decide what they want to do. Do they want to have Pierre Poilievre represent them in 3 years at the general election? Is he the guy who can win? Many of them think he cannot be that person and should not be that person. What do they do about it? 3 years is a really long time in politics. 18 months ago, the NDP was polling ahead of the Liberals. Then we had a change in Prime Minister, a complete revamp of what we thought our political assumptions, were going into the 2+ months ahead of the election. So I don't know that we have any clue what's going to happen in 3 years.
Yeah.
Quick 30 seconds to you, Catherine, a final thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what all the opposition parties do with this moment. Rosemary, I think they're going to want to be more pointed in their attacks against the Prime Minister, but I think the Liberals are going to try to make it challenging for people to oppose them. We know there's an affordability announcement coming tomorrow. That is the Liberals' way of saying, hey, gave us a majority. Look what we're doing for you Canadians, right? We've seen that before with the carbon tax and the middle class tax cuts. So things will remain interesting even with the purported stability of a majority government.
No, I don't doubt it, because that's what we all do. Thank you all very much for being here on a Monday for At Issue. I appreciate it. That is At Issue on the National. Now I'll send things back to Adrian in Toronto.
Thanks, Rosie. Up next, a new study out tonight is looking at the progress made in the fight against cancer.
Some of the patients that I would see 20 years ago would live on average a year. Now, 7 to 10 years later, they are still alive and well.
Why experts say early detection and better treatment is extending lives. Plus, big changes to how school boards are run in Ontario, including linking grades to attendance, what it means for students and teachers. That's next. New modeling out tonight points to some troubling cancer numbers expected for Canada this year. To Shauna Reid now on the types of cancers on the rise and some reasons for optimism.
How did that shape your approach?
Cancer has touched Jason Ellis's life in unimaginable ways. In high school, he lost his mother to breast cancer. 5 years ago, his wife Marilyn was diagnosed with late-stage sarcoma. 1 year later, at age 30, she passed away.
It completely obliterated everything. We had just bought our first house, wanted to settle down, have kids.
And last summer, another devastating diagnosis, this time his own, a stage 3 head and neck cancer.
At that point, everything just shifted. It was almost a I can't believe it moment.
New modeling suggests cancer numbers are holding steady. This year, more than 254,000 Canadians will be diagnosed, and nearly 88,000 people will die from it. Lung, breast, prostate, and colorectal cancers will account for nearly half of new cases. And there are some concerning trends. Pancreatic and uterine cancers are increasing.
One of the leading risk factors for those cancer types is excess body weight. Nearly half of the Canadian population has a waist circumference that puts them at elevated risk.
While cervical and head and neck cancers are on the rise, despite prevention tools like screening programs and an HPV vaccine.
We aren't getting the coverage that is needed.
But there is some progress. Since the early 2000s, colorectal cancer cases have decreased by 30%, in part thanks to early detection.
We also have better treatments and better surgeries.
And people are living longer, says this oncologist.
Some of the patients that I would see 20 years ago would live on average a year. Now, 7 to 10 years later, they are still alive and well.
Jason Ellis completed chemo and radiation in December.
I'm still struggling with side effects, with potential for reoccurrence.
He will continue to be monitored while he navigates his life after treatment. To Shauna Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
Researchers at Dalhousie University are exploring the health benefits of prescribing food as a form of medication to older people. As Kayla Hounsell tells us, they hope this type of treatment can also help combat food insecurity.
Jim Grove loves blueberries, and it's a good thing. He's now required to eat a cup every day for a year.
I'm up to 35 pounds now, I think, of blueberries. That's what I've eaten since the start.
How do you feel? That's 2 minutes in.
This is Grove's 3-month assessment. He's a participant in a new study at Dalhousie University.
Keep going. Almost done.
Researchers are examining whether providing personalized workouts 3 times a week and blueberries and 30 grams of protein every day will improve frailty and heart health in older people.
Here are your blueberries for the next 2 weeks, Jim.
Fantastic, thank you.
We're wondering if that's all done for a person. Does that increase the chances of them consuming and those foods and doing the workouts? And does that help to get them stronger?
If the study here at Dalhousie shows that eating blueberries every day does improve frailty and heart health, researchers hope that will bolster the argument to have doctors prescribe them. Yes, we're talking about writing prescriptions for berries. It's part of a larger trend known as food prescribing.
Not a lot of people have heard about it.
This University of Victoria professor has studied food prescribing. He says clinicians in Ontario and Alberta are already prescribing fresh food, but only in small pockets. Early results show it does decrease food insecurity, but he cautions people might still fall through the cracks.
And so would this actually exacerbate some of the health inequities that exist in the Canadian context if we're basically only providing these types of food prescription services to people who have access to primary care providers? Because
he also says more research is needed to determine the cost efficiency and long-term effectiveness. Grove has diabetes and arthritis.
It's tough, but it's getting better.
You can feel it getting better?
Oh yeah, I feel stronger.
If food is medicine, he says it seems to be working for him. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
The Ontario government has announced legislation to overhaul how the province's school boards are run. And as Deanna Sumanak-Johnson tells us, the law would also affect students and their final grades.
The Ontario government is making sweeping changes to education. A new law that includes linking high school grades to attendance.
Sometimes I get family responsibilities, so I have to skip the second period or the first period and come at lunch.
In grade 9 and 10, 15% of students' final mark will be based on attendance. For grades 11 and 12, it'll be 10%. A measure meant to tackle student absenteeism that's been on the rise since the pandemic.
I have a couple of people who's literally I see them once in a month. And I don't understand that because you're grade 12 students, what's your problem?
Mandatory written exams are also coming back for high schoolers, a move this education expert welcomes.
Bringing back exams used to be old school, but now it may be part of the future because it's one of the few ways you can judge how students are doing is a time-limited assessment under close supervision.
The law could also change how school boards are run. The government has been frustrated with elected school board trustees for some time now, arguing they spend too much of taxpayers' dollars while not managing school boards properly. 8 boards have already been put under provincial supervision for a year now.
Trustees will continue to play a role, but that role will change significantly. We will introduce a salary cap, reduce the number of elected trustees to no more than 12 per board, and eliminate most expense accounts.
The country's biggest board, the Toronto District School Board, would see its number of trustees cut in half. The Ontario Public School Boards Association said in a statement, removing these responsibilities from trustees means removing decisions from people who are directly accountable to the community. The province has also introduced a new role, Chief Executive Officer, responsible for financial and operational oversight. Opponents of the bill are worried how that role would be appointed. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up, a Toronto shoe cobbler gets a new sewing machine thanks to community support.
They showed how much they appreciate and they value that the small businesses.
How locals rallied behind him to raise over $11,000. That is next in our moment. This is Alzar Bayanai, a shoe cobbler with a small business in Toronto, and he's using his brand new sewing machine that was bought from community donations. So after his old machine broke, Marcia Shandor, one of his customers, started a fundraiser, and the community rallied, raising over $11,000 for a new one. So tonight, locals supporting the small business make our moment.
We have a small celebration that we got our machine by fundraising from the community. It's like a sewing machine, but specially made for shoe repair.
I had brought my shoes to Alazar to ask him to fix the zip, and he said, oh no, I can't because my machine's broken. A new one will cost $11,000. I came back and I said, look, why don't we set up a fundraiser? And within 3 weeks, we had raised the full $11,000. I was knocked sideways by it.
I cannot describe it in words. Even people who doesn't met me, they showed how much they appreciate and they value that the small businesses. They came in person also to celebrate.
Our local city councillor came to cut the ribbon to officially open the machine. It was a really lovely celebration.
Shoe repair is like a dying art, but people, they need the service. Now I am back in business with the new machine with full force to serve the community, which gave me this support.
Oh, this is fantastic. He's been doing this for over 20 years in the Dufferin Mall in Toronto. Second generation shoe cobbler. Marcia says, interestingly, when she first pitched the idea of a fundraiser, he was very shy about it and said, I don't know, is it even legal? He wasn't really sure what would happen. And as he said, He's back in business. From all of us at The National, thanks for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.